Hello, welcome everyone. Today we will learn about implicit intents. We have learned about intents earlier, and those intents were known as explicit intents. We use those intents to invoke another activity in the same application. So we had developed a math quiz application in which we had three activities, and from the main activity we used to invoke either of the other two, that is hint or the cheat activity. Today we are going to see that how one application can start activity in another application. All the fundamentals are same, just some syntax is different. So let's get started with it. So implicit intents, as you see, are used to start another app from one app. For example, you may have seen that when you are using WhatsApp, you can attach a photo by taking a picture from your camera. And WhatsApp starts your camera app, you take a photo, it gets added into your WhatsApp, which you can then send. This is an example of one app starting activity in another app. Today you will learn how to do that yourself. So, before we move further, let's try to understand what is the intent structure, or what does an intent contain. So an intent contains two things. Number one is the action that the intent wants to do, and number two, the data, that is the data on which that supposed action needs to be done. So the action could be a simple view action or an edit action or any other action, and similarly there would be appropriate data for each action. Here are some examples of the action and data pairs. Let us go through them one by one. So the first example is of an action type view, and there is a data which looks like is the data of one of the contacts in the user's device. And this actually is what it looks like. So basically this intent with this data will display information about the person whose identifier is 1. Similarly, the second example is that not only just displaying the information, this time it will be the phone dialer activity that will get invoked and with the number filled in, with the person details filled in. And then the third is another example of view action, in which we start with a telephone number, so it will display as the phone dialer with the given number filled in. Now you may notice that here we also had a view, here we also had a view. So the view action does what is considered the most reasonable thing to do for a particular URI. When it was contact information, it was displaying information about the person. When it was a telephonic number, it is displaying the phone dialer. The fourth example is similar to the second example, except that here instead of getting data from the contact information, we are getting data directly from here. And then in the last example, we are trying to edit the information of the contact that is given here. And then in the another example, we want to display a list of people, because we are not giving any specific identifier here as such. So it will display as a list of people which the user can browse through. So these are some good 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 examples which show you an action and data pairs as you use them in intent. Now let's move forward. Let's look at some of the examples. So in our first example, what we are trying to do is we are trying to dial a number, which is this number. So we create a URI object, and then we create our intent with the required action and the data. In the second example, we want to show this geolocation to the user. So we create another URI object and then we create the intent which shows an action and the data. Earlier the action was the dial and now the action is the view. Then in the third example, we want to show a web page. So we create a URI object and then we start the intent. Then we create the intent with the right action, which is view, and the data. Just like you did in the explicit intent that whenever you needed to send extra data, you used put extra. And on the other side, you retrieve the data using get extra. You can do the similar thing in case of implicit intents as well. Now, in the previous example, you saw that we were using URI. The advantage of using URI is that if you use the URI, the system will determine the appropriate MIME type by default. Okay. However, if you are not using the URI, then you can use set type. We will very shortly see another example of this sort. So yes, here is another example. This example is of a type in which I would like to send an email. So I create an intent where my action is a send action, and then I want to set some data which will be required by it. So number one, I set the data type. Here my data type is HTTP plain text type, and then I use put extras to add additional data so that my email can be sent. So I use put extra to give the address of the recipient, to give the subject of the email, to set the text of the email, and then also to attach something to the email. Let's look at another example. In this example, I am trying to set up a calendar event. So I create an intent. Here my intent action is insert action. And then I want to pass it some data which it will use. So let's see that what kind of data we want to pass. So we would like to pass the begin time and the end time of the event. So we create a begin time and time objects and we added that information using put extra. And then we would also like to add the title of the event. And then we would also like to add the location where this event is taking place. So this is all needed to create a calendar event. Many times you may have seen applications which display some information and then ask you, would you like to add it to your calendar? And at that time, if you press yes, your calendar application pops up with some information filled in and you just save it. Now you can see how does all that work. Now, we just gave few very interesting examples. Let us consider a scenario in which, let us say, your phone does not have a camera or your phone does not have a browser. Now, if it does not have a camera and another activity starts an intent which asks the photo to be taken, it has the risk of the app getting crashed. Similarly, for the browser or any other action which your device or another device cannot support. As a developer, you should write your code such that your application always works and is never shut down unexpectedly. So if we are developing our application such that it is starting another activity, we should not just assume that there would be some activity available at all the users' devices who may be using your application. So what we need to do is, before we launch our activity or before we launch the target activity, we should check that if such an activity exists or not. That is there an activity which can handle my intent or not? So how do we do that? So we do that using a method called query intent activities. This method returns you a list of activities capable of handling your intent. And the use of this method is very easy. So for example, if I want to use this method, all I need to do is have these three lines. Let us see what these lines are. So I start with a package manager. I get a reference to it. And then I create a list activities and I call my method on the package manager reference. So package manager dot query intent activities, and I pass it the right kind of intent for which I am querying the activities. The second parameter is not very important here, but you may want to view its description in the developer website. So here we are only saying that, hey, give us only the one which match default. This call will fill the list of the activities that can handle this type of intent. Now all we are interested in knowing, is there even a single activity which can do that? So next I check simply by the size, and if the size is 0, I say yes, there is at least one activity which can handle it. So if I want to display a web page, I know there is at least one activity which can show the web page, and that may be good enough for me. Here is a more concrete example of the same thing. I would like to show a geolocation. So I create a URI, I create an intent with action view and the location. Now I need some activities on the user's device which can show this location. So instead of just starting my intent directly, I would first do the check. I will verify that it resolves. So I start with the package manager and then I go into the list. I call my method query intent activities and I get the size of the activities into a boolean. So my boolean sets true if and only if the size is greater than 0. If the size is less than 0 or is equivalent to 0, well, it will never be less than 0, it will be equivalent to 0. The boolean sets to false. Now when I want to start my activity when I want to launch my intent or start my activity, all I do is I first make a check. So this one line, two line, and this third line make sure that my intent will only try to invoke an activity if such an activity exists on the target device. This is really the right way of writing your code. Now, at times you may have also seen Android giving you a choice of application to choose from. For example, if there is an information need to be displayed, Android may want to show you the different browsers that you have installed. So how does Android do it? So again, we have a method called create chooser which does it. How do we use the create chooser? Again, the use of create chooser is very easy. For any given intent, I started by calling intent.createChooser. So create chooser I am calling on the intent, and I pass down my intent and my title. Now I again do some verification by saying that if there is a activity, but this time because I am using chooser, here I was not using anything, I was just starting activity because I only wanted to start with any activity. Here I want the user to choose. This will display a user a choice of the activities that can handle my intent, and user can choose a suitable activity and then that activity will be launched. Now we come to the last topic of allowing other apps to start your activity. For this, let's go back to our code. I'm again displaying you the code of our math quiz application. Those of you who may have forgotten our math quiz application, here is a simple revision. Our math quiz application had 3 activities and we were using explicit intent to go from one activity to another activity. Now, I am going into the manifest file. As you know that all Android apps have a manifest file. So I'm going to the manifest file and I am now looking at it more closely. So you will see that all my 3 activities are mentioned here: the quiz activity, the hint activity, and the cheat activity. However, my main activity, which is the quiz activity here, also has another field called intent filter. And earlier we have known that Android programs don't have a main function because any application can start an activity, but they do have something called an action main, which determines the first activity that needs to be launched for a default app. So now you can see that if I want another application to start my activity, I will have to set the correct intent filters in my manifest file. So with this, our knowledge about intent is complete. Now we will very quickly see an example of using an implicit intent within our math quiz application only. The purpose of the example is to show you how the implicit intent works and not to change any functionality of the math quiz application. But with that example done, hopefully you would learn everything that you need to learn about the intent, and you can then take self-study to learn further. So let's go back to our program and let's add some code to just display a web page. So if you remember, our math quiz application was simple. If we go to hint, we were starting another activity, and then if we were pressing this button, it was showing us a hint. Now I want to make some changes so that when I press this button, it not only does what it was doing earlier, but it also launches another activity in another application. And in this case, I would just like the new activity to display a web page. Okay, so let's stop this execution, go back and add some code. So I will go to the set on click listener of the hint button. And as you see that I have already added some code. This code is very easy. We saw this code as an example. You can use the same code to see it in action. So I am starting with a URI object, URI web page, URI parse, and then I'm creating my intent, which is of type action view. So our action item here is the view action only, and then we are passing the data. Our data is complete, so we need not to use put extra. And then we start, then we call the start activity method. As you know that whenever we use intent, we launch that intent in a way by calling the start activity method or a start activity for result. But because here we don't want anything to come back to us, we are only doing start activity. Now let's start our application again and let's see what happens if we press the show hint button. So our application is starting. So our application has started. Press the hint button. We go to the hint activity. In a way, we started an explicit intent. We move to another activity within our application. And now we will be starting an implicit intent and we will be moving to an activity in another application and not just our application. So let's press the button and see what happens. So I press the button and here we go. A new activity has been launched and the web page has been displayed. That is, this code www.android.com has come into the play. So in this example, you saw both explicit intent and implicit intent in action. Let's stop it. So now you know everything about using intents to move from one activity to another activity. Some of you may be tempted, especially in case of the explicit intent, to short circuit your program and instead of intent, try to do the same activity using, let's say, static variables. This is not the right approach, because as you saw that when we want to use the activities in another application, we do not have access to the code. So intent is a very cleaner way of starting other activities. Soon we will be learning about permissions, and there we will know another benefit of using intent. Thank you very much. Happy learning.